Good evening, everyone. We want to thank the Utah Film Center for hosting our film this month, and I want to welcome everyone to tonight's discussion about the short film Beloved Community Project. For those of you who have not had a chance to see the film, we invite you to watch the film via the Utah Film Center's website, as they are hosting the film for free and on demand until the end of Black History Month. I would like to turn the time over to Marian and Amy, and they are going to introduce the film, and then we will proceed with the panel discussion.
Amy, you start.
Oh, okay.
Go first.
Wow, okay. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We are so excited to share some stories around the Beloved Community Project. My name's Amy MacDonald. I'm the founder and director of Brolly Arts and a co-creator of the Beloved Community Project film, along with Marian. So you can tell we finish each other's sentences and share things. Our project has been 6.5 years in the making and is the current iteration of our work on Black social change Utah. Marian will share more stories, but we met when Marian was a graduate student at Westminster College, and she was in my class when I was teaching. And we hit it off, and Marian invited me to be her capstone advisor. And I think Marian invited me because as an artist and working in the arts, I love to realize ideas and experiences through art, culture, and humanities, which is also in Marian's wheelhouse and inner soul. So Marian, do you want to just talk about how this started, and then I'll jump in about the multidisciplinary project?
Yeah, I was very interested in capturing the stories of local Utah social change activists. I wanted in 100 years for people who were interested in figuring out what African Americans were doing in the beginning of this century. I wanted them to find a thread. And so it was very important to me to write my thesis on Black social change in Utah and how it intersects with the United States as a whole. And conversations with Amy, we crafted a presentation and we worked with SLCC TV to record the early interviews, and then for the last sort of 6 years with Twig Media Lab. And so we are so grateful to them, to their genius, helping us weave the story together that you see as the Beloved Community Film Project. So, Amy, did I leave anything out?
Well, because our journey I think is ongoing and everlasting. But part of this, the stories of these amazing Black social change makers in Utah are so inspiring. And because I get inspired to create multidisciplinary projects, we were able to create an event that encompassed storytelling, dance, music, media, imagery, history, all inspired by these amazing stories. And I bring this up because Marian and I worked on many iterations of Black social change since then, and this led to the opportunity to create the Beloved Community Project. And I just wanted to highlight the dance that, if you have seen the film, that also came about because many of our social change agents, as we call them in these stories, have worked for change for decades. And it was also interesting to contrast that or include voices of 20 to 30 somethings who prefer to express their experience of being Black and also being Black in Utah through dance. And so it was really important to us to include all these mediums so that in whatever form people wished to share their stories, we could express it. Um,
And so we've got a couple of partners. Davis School District is heavily featured in the film, and Salt Lake Community College's Arts and Community, Arts and Communication and Media, a School of Arts, under Dean Richard Scott. So absolutely supportive in making this film. And so got a shout out there for them.
I think before we get into conversation, we'll turn it right over to Tashelle. I think it's really important to notice that any movement or any effort towards change takes a village. And so there are so many people who came together to not only make Black social change Utah possible, but also the beloved community project. And with that, how about we turn it over to Tashelle?
Well, thank you both. So tonight I'll be today's moderator. So feel free to use the chat feature and ask us your questions, share your comments. We're excited to hear from you. From those who have watched the film, we have two amazing panelists who are featured in the film, so you can ask questions directly to them about their stories, or if you have more questions in general, we'll make sure to try to answer those at best. So for starters, I want to start us off by saying, I can't breathe. So my name is Tashelle Wright, and I'm a PhD candidate in public health at the University of California in Merced. My call to action is to make an impact, whether big or small, on the health of Black individuals and Black communities. I am honored to be able to introduce these phenomenal women on today's panel. So first, I would like to do a formal introduction of my amazing mentor, Marian Dora Howe-Taylor. So Marian Dora Howe-Taylor is the Community Outreach Manager for the School of Arts, Communication, and Media at Salt Lake Community College. She's a co-creator of Black Social Change Utah, and she's featured in the beloved Community Film Project, as well as a co-creator of this amazing film.
I can't breathe. One of the last words heard by George Floyd a year ago in the spring. I can't breathe is a sentiment how African Americans feel in this country. My call to action, 1973-74 academic year, I was a freshman in high school, and race riots broke out. My mentor at that time, Sister Mary Juliana, gave me the day off after a weekend of horrible riots and sent me to the library, and I found a book of poetry edited by Langston Hughes and one of the only female literary voices of the day, Naomi Long Madgett. And she wrote a poem that spoke to me and stays with me to this day. It says, I've come this far to freedom, and I won't turn back. I'm climbing to the highway from my old dirt track. I'm coming and I'm going and I'm stretching and I'm growing, and I'll reap what I've been sowing, or my skin's not black. I have prayed and slaved and waited, and yes, I have sung my song. You've lashed me and you've treed me and you've everything but freed me. But in time, you'll know you need me, and it won't be long, for I have seen the daylight breaking high above the bow. I've found my destination, and yes, I have made my vow. So whether you abhor me, deride me, or ignore me, mighty mountains loom before me, and I won't stop now. I can't breathe. I can't breathe, but I won't stop now.
Thank you,
Tashelle?
Marian. I would like to introduce Amy MacDonald. So Amy MacDonald is the founder and director of Brolly Arts, owner of MacDonald Designs, and co-creator of Black Social Change Utah and the beloved Community Film Project.
I can't breathe. My call to action came by growing up in a family of very progressive parents who believed that you should leave the world a better place than the way you found it. It was ingrained into me that when help is needed, you help. And when you see something that needs addressing, you step in. And you step in with courage and grace. So my call to action came from my parents.
Thank you, Amy. And next, I would like to introduce Ms. Barbara Beard-White. Ms. Barbara Beard-White is a retired principal and educator in the Davis County School District.
You're
Muted, Barbara.
You're muted.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I can't breathe. My story started back in Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And from kindergarten to second grade, I went to an all-Black school. So everybody looked like me. And when I was in first grade, that's when I realized I wanted to become a teacher. It just so happened that when third grade came around that school year, I was bused to an integrated school. I got on the bus. I went several miles from my little Black community, got off the bus. No one looked like me. And so I was shunned. Nobody talked to me. And so day after day, I would get off that bus, go into the school, and come back home and get my validation. So what I did is I found myself a safe haven. I'd get off the bus and I'd run to the swings, and I would swing, swing, swing until it was time for the bell to ring and go into the school. Well, people can be so cruel. I can remember one morning getting off the bus, running to my swing set, and some mean-spirit children stretched a rubber band, and it got me across my mouth. And I wore that scar for so long. My call to action is, because I wanted to be a teacher in first grade, I wanted to grow up, be a teacher, and so that every child that knocked my door would have a safe haven. That's my call to action.
Thank you, Barbara. And finally, I would like to introduce Mrs. Adrienne Scott Ellis. Mrs. Adrienne Scott Ellis is a teacher at the Davis County School District.
I can't breathe. My call to action started very early in my life, and it continues to this day. It began when I was in kindergarten. On our way to recess, I was shoved down a set of stairs. I hit the ground and I was spat upon. And it wasn't just moisture out of your mouth, it was mucus filled. And it landed on my forehead. And the other children just laughed. And I didn't want to touch it because I was so disgusted. When he pushed me down, he called me, don't touch me, you dirty nigger. That felt like a punch in the stomach. And then to feel that spit on my forehead, that was just another insult upon insult. And I picked myself up and I ran to the restroom, and I just cupped that in my hand because I didn't want to touch it. I made it to the restroom. And when I picked up that tissue and started to wipe, I just remember thinking, if only I could wipe the Blackness away, life would be so much easier. And I know after that moment, I struggled with my self-esteem. I struggled with self-doubt. My confidence failed. And I thank God that my mother was wise enough to realize that there were things going on. And she began to teach me about history and my ancestors. And she talked about the struggles that they endured. And with each story, it was like she breathed a new fighting spirit within me. I knew that I had to go to school and get an education, where I learned that my ancestors, there were laws that forbid them to read and get an education. So I was determined I was going to be successful. But as in the story, in the film, you know, that I struggled with, you know, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. What is out there for me? And so a very good high point was when Barbara came into our school and was an educator. Then I knew this was going to be my avenue in which to make a difference. And I became an educator for Davis School District. I was a certified REACH trainer, that's respecting ethnic and ethnic heritage. Sorry, I'm getting nervous here. Cultural heritage. Right now, I am about to retire. I have been an educator for 30 years and made sure that my students understood that their diversity was valuable and made them who they are and to love who they are. I would often assign them historical figures and they would study these figures, and we would do a wax performance where they would speak in first person and they were connected to these historical figures. I am now, after the death of George Floyd, all that trauma from my childhood just came to the surface, and I spent a considerable amount of time in anguish. And so I was inspired to start a community garden. So this could be a vehicle in which the community could come together and have real life discussions of racism and dialogue about possible solutions. And through the process of it all, growing this food and giving it to those in need has been food to my soul.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Now I will be opening up this discussion to audience questions. Again, feel free to use the chat and ask questions and share comments.
How do I make me go black?
And one of the first questions I want to ask is, and this will be for our panelists, Ms. Barbara and Mrs. Adrienne. How do you feel about your experience with social change now? I know, Adrienne, you talked a little bit about the things you're doing in Davis School District, which is amazing because that's the district I grew up here in Utah. I wish these initiatives were there when I was there. But what are some other, how do you feel about social change now?
Barbara, do you want to go first?
Oh, okay. You can go, Adrienne.
Okay, I will say that along my journey, I have discovered that those challenges, you have to go through those challenges because those are the things that are going to strengthen you and shape you so you can fulfill your purpose. So it has not been an easy journey. I have been met with many obstacles, but they have only strengthened me and given me more purpose and passion.
Well, with my experience, I've been retired for 11 years now. And so I'm pretty much out of the loop. However, I can recall that my experience being a principal, trying to become a principal, because I was in the classroom for 20 years and I wanted to reach more students and also help parents. So that's why I went the avenue of becoming an administrator. But I found that doors were shut before I even tried to open them. They really tried very hard to hold me back. As far as the community was concerned, and I'm talking about Davis County, it was okay for me to teach their children, but it wasn't okay for me to be their boss. And so that was a struggle for me. And I found out that for 5 years, They did not even send out my resume to the various schools to apply to become a principal. And eventually, with tenacity, hold tight to your faith, don't give up. The road is not easy. The mountain is hard to climb, but you keep trudging and you keep on, and you make sure that you are qualified, make sure that your ducks are in a row, and that they cannot not give you a chance. And as a Black or African American, I have found, and Adrienne can vouch for that, and so many others, we have to be better than them to even be, quote, equal to them as far as education is concerned. And so I just continued to trudge on, and eventually I did become the very first African American principal in Davis School District. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you. So the next question I have is, as we are celebrating Black History Month, what are your thoughts as to where we are in regards to the beloved community values, goals, and ideals?
I would say we still have a long way to go to get to Dr. King's beloved community. He really wanted everyone to be able to have empathy, to love one another the way you love yourself, to be fair, to not expose children to hatred because they mirror us, they mimic us. And so we must stay focused on love to even get a little bit closer to Dr. King's beloved community. And we're so far away from that right now. Anyone else?
I would like to speak to that. I am fortunate that I am still in the classroom, and so children, they give me hope. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, my students are assigned historical figures. So there's oftentimes that I speak to them as though they are those individuals. And just last week, I had the opportunity to have Dr. Jackie Thompson come into my classroom, and she was representing Ruby Bridges. And so in the discussion of Ruby Bridges, and I also showed beloved community, children just were blown away, and they were talking about themselves. So I have George Washington Carver and Reverend Francis Davis attended Tuskegee University. So I had my little George Washington Carver say, I founded that institute. I had Frederick Douglass talking about, I'm the one who gave Lincoln the idea to allow the soldiers to be in the Civil War. And I knew about the 14th Amendment because I had taught myself how to read, but the children, they were making the connections on their own as they're watching this film, as they're listening to Jackie. And it really was just overwhelming because they have internalized these figures and they are connecting it to current times. And so on their own, they got out their little whiteboards and they wrote, Black Lives Matter. All men are created equal. Other quotes that their historical figures had said that spoke to that moment, that we need to be treated equally and fairly. And it's very simple. The children were like, how come people are finding this so difficult? You just treat people how you would like to be treated. Exactly. So children give me hope that we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
I
volunteered.
Oh, go ahead, Barbara. Go ahead.
Before COVID rolled in, I volunteered at the Catholic Give Me a Chance down in Ogden. And so I was there 3 times a week. And so I was tutoring the students there, and mainly the students were Hispanic. And I found that All children want to be loved. All children want to know their limits. All children want to know that they are valued. And so my thing was, be yourself, respect everyone, and give everyone a chance. Look at someone for who they are and not judge them as a group, but an individual person, not from a particular group. And I thoroughly enjoyed volunteering. I'm chuckling because of this new math that they was trying to, and I'm just not with that new math, but volunteering to help students after school with this after school project was an awesome opportunity. And so I look forward to doing that again.
If I may just add just a thought that kind of dovetails onto Adrienne and Barbara's and Marian's comments is currently Marian and I have had an opportunity to virtually go into classrooms and be present after students watch the Beloved Community Project. And there was a great difference between 6th graders and 7th graders. And the 6th graders were really remarkable in that they are chatty and want to share what they thought. And it was interesting in regards to beloved values or ideals. One student said, I thought we were all the same. I didn't know that people think differently than that. So that was one comment. And another comment was, I didn't know we treated Black people so badly. Why did we do that? And another comment was from a little girl, 6th grader, I believe. Marian, correct me if I'm wrong, but she just stood right up and she said, I'm going to be an activist.
Great.
Excellent.
So I think with children, I think with adults, it's a little trickier to approach it first with empathy and compassion about the conversation, particularly because I was corrected recently. I thought Utah's Black population was 2% of the total population, and I was corrected that it's 1.8. So, so that I think what we all experience actually is magnified in Utah because it's a small but mighty and resilient and graceful and courageous demographic. And inspiring beloved values, I think, may be quite challenging at times if we can't first approach it with empathy and compassion.
Well, thank you for answering that. And I have a question. So an audience member named Tanya asks, are there any policy changes being discussed by the Utah Board of Education to address inequalities and social justice?
Wow, now that I couldn't answer.
I'm not sure. But yesterday, Amy and I went to Davis County Educational Equity, their monthly meeting. And the superintendent was there and assistant superintendents, parents and staff, as well as some of the folks from their board. And afterwards, I got a text that the superintendent would like to show Beloved Community to their teachers. And so I think that they are thinking about how they can move the issue of fairness and equality forward.
I was also told from a member of the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs that a person suggested, why don't we use films to initiate dialogues and potentially change? And I guess Governor Cox replied, I want state legislators there and I want films that will inspire policy changes. So maybe we have a chance.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Tanya. And I do think from recent events that these are discussions that are being held far and wide now, which is super crucial and super important. So thank you for that question.
I think there's one other, if I may, one other thing to add is a woman who works with a media corporation asked Marian and me what my company is all white. How do we hire people of color? And we both replied, you're not ready to hire people of color. If you would like to hire people of color, the first step is to change the culture within your organization so that when you have that modified and welcoming, perhaps that really talented person of color might like to come and work with you. That's another thought.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's an important thought. Thank you, Amy. So the next question I want to ask, and I know some of you have touched upon this, but how can people engage in social change, especially thinking about we're in a very virtual environment. Maybe Utah has seemed to be not as welcoming to these conversations. So how can people be engaged in social change?
I think we have to accept that this is a country of laws and state legislatures, as well as the US state representatives and senators need to hear from us with regards to legislation that would promote equality. There's still slave laws on books in states across the country. This past year, the NAACP, Ogden, as well as Salt Lake, lobbied our state legislature to take the slave laws off the books. And so that's a big thing nationally. And so we need people of integrity and compassion to look at what's happening to people of color. San Francisco is dealing with some horrible things, attacks on Asian elderly and beating them up and sending someone to the hospital, and one man has died. And so there is race unrest, inequality throughout this nation to all people of color. We've got to stop that.
So with my project, Sowing Seeds of Change, a part of that is, self-reflection and self-growth. And so we have a book club, a book discussion every other Thursday. And so this was one book that we've just completed, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. This is excellent. And so just having the knowledge base of what it's going to take to be an anti-racist, just how systemic racism works, and just how deeply rooted it is within our system. And then also healing yourself. I mean, being a Black person is not easy. It is a day-to-day struggle with microaggressions, hearing the news and it's someone else losing their life simply because of the color of their skin. And so this was another book that we have read, My Grandmother's Hands, and it talks about racialized and intergenerational trauma. And so all of us, we have room to grow, and using books and getting together and having a dialogue discussion about these issues, I think is a step in the right direction, and getting involved in your local government.
I'm going to inject this. I believe the people in power want to stay in power. And so white supremacists, they want to stay in power. In order to do that, they have to put their knee on the people of color and Black people's necks so that they can stay in power. And until man realized that we are on this ball of dirt and we need to get along, and the power has to change. It's not that we want to be better, but we have to close that gap on the haves and the have-nots. And so those in power have to realize that we don't want you to give us anything. Just get your knee off our necks and let us do it, because we have the ability within us to be just as successful as you are. Not better, but just equal to you. So my thing is, as a race of people, Americans, we have to dig into our past and come and take on the responsibility of how we got here. It wasn't, for instance, this is Black History Month, and we hear about how the inventions, Garrett Morgan, for instance, African-American man who invented the traffic light. Until we can get into our history and tell the truth, unveil the lies, then we can't proceed. We can't go forward. We've got to go back and dig up the roots, how we got where we are with our founder dads, fathers, having slaves and all that. We've just got to dig in, uncover our past, and take full responsibility before we can move on.
That was great. Thank you all for adding to that. So the next question I have for the panelists is, how did you find community and acceptance here in Utah?
Well, everybody has their own story. I moved here, my first year in Utah was 1998. I've been driving for years. First time ever, pulled over by a police officer. You know, the whole story about driving while Black. So there I am driving my husband's candy apple red Cadillac, gorgeous car. Pulled over, got my papers out, and the police officer recognized my husband's name. And so he said, we got a notice that a car like this had been stolen. And I thought to myself, yeah, right. You just saw a Black person driving a Cadillac and that was it. And so a couple of months after that, I'm in downtown Salt Lake getting ready to Christmas concert, Tabernacle Choir. And I went into, I think it was Dillard's, and I'm in a full length mink coat with a fox collar. Do I look like the help? Woman walks up to me, dumps her stuff, all, you know, I'm holding a scarf or something. And so I guess she just saw my hands out. So she just dumps her stuff in my arms and says, ring me up. I couldn't even process it. I just started screaming and everybody comes running. I left that store with more coupons for 50% off. Some I used that day. I barely paid for the stuff I was going to pay for with all those coupons, because the Dillard's management wanted me to come back and wanted me to know that the store was not racist. But so many people see us, they only see our color. They don't see us as individuals. So those are two stories of my early life here in Utah.
Well,
I'll go next if you don't mind.
Oh,
So I was born and raised here in Utah. I'm fortunate enough that I have a large family that is here in Utah. That is really my saving grace. But here in Utah, you know, the LDS culture, the LDS religion is a major piece of the culture. And so early on, basically I was told, you know, you're a great person, we like you, but you know you will never make it to the celestial kingdom because you are cursed by Cain, you know, and your curse was the color of your skin. So there's always been, oh, we really like you, you're great, but there's always that but in the relationships. So that's always been difficult. And then I have 3 sons, and you know, I had my own childhood experiences, which was very difficult, and made the mistake of assuming that things had changed, and that as my children went through the school system, that they did not have the same problems that I had experienced. But one thing that I have discovered is that we don't openly share those experiences that we have that cause trauma to us. So it wasn't until my kids, they're now adults, did they share about some of the circumstances that they had to endure as they were going through school. So I made the assumption that everything was a-okay. So we cannot assume that everything is a-okay. We need to start asking our youth what is happening and give them safe spaces where they can communicate the truth about their experiences here in the school systems. My youngest is autistic, so I am in constant fear of, because sometimes he will wander away, and there's times that we have to call the police in which to find him. That terrifies me. It is a conflicting feeling of, do we call on law enforcement to help us find our child, or are we putting our son in more danger by making that call? And that is a serious fear that I deal with. And part of my motivation with Sowing Seeds of Change is that we seriously have to make some changes, because I do not want to live my life in fear.
Well, I landed on planet Utah 1972. Like I said, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I didn't see anybody that looked like me. At the time, my husband, I thought he was military, and so nobody looked like me, but I was going to Weber State. I had some negative experiences, but my thing that kept me going is my faith, my walk with Jesus. Every day I left my house, I said, okay, Jesus, here we go. And he protected me. I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I would go to the college every day because I wanted to get my continue my education once I got here. To the point that if I saw somebody with a brown face, I said, hi, you know, because I needed that connection. But I was grown and I was strong and I could handle my business. So like Adrienne, when my children were born, I have 2 girls and a son. And I had to educate them on being Black, because babies they come here knowing nothing. We feed into them, positive or negative. I had to teach my son, when you go into a store, how to behave. Keep your hands in your pockets, or keep your hands exposed, or don't touch anything. And I have yet to hear of a Caucasian person saying the same thing to their son. When you go into a store, watch yourself, because they'll be watching you. And while the people in the stores are so busy watching us, there are those who are doing the stealing, not us. I'm just going to say us because I taught my children to protect themselves. And like Adrienne, my children didn't tell me until they were grown some of the stories. And I can remember Kenya as the oldest, and how later on in life, she told me how she had to defend her sister Jaquetta because the children in the elementary school called them niggers, and Kenya beat them up.
Yeah.
And then Kenya said, Jaquetta, don't tell mom, because mom she'll get us, you know? And so they didn't tell me because I would have gotten them. But it's sad, it's so sad, but we had to teach our children to protect themselves. I can remember telling my girls, that's wonderful that you have your little Caucasian friends, but let me tell you, once you get to junior high school, all that is over. They don't want you to be locker partners. They don't want your friendship. And oh, mom. When the time came, they say, Mom, you were right. So it's hard, but now life is good. And I still step out in faith. I still step out like I own this ground I'm walking on. I own this. And so I think that this is what we have to do. And that was one of the things that I think was one of my strong suits when I was in education, because I taught first, fourth, and sixth grade. And then I was a principal, and I stood head taller than them dads coming into them buildings, and you got to own it. So no, but Jesus was the one that kept me strong. And now I got the wonderfulest, sweetest guy in the world. And so life is good.
Thank you so much. And
I guess it's a little bit too much, but
I think we all can attest to that. And then the last question I'll ask is, what is next for the Beloved Community Project?
Wow. Okay. If I may, I'd like to just circle back to how do you engage and how do you engage in change before I talk about what's next. And I think what we, by design, attempted to do with this film is we provided ways of how to engage, how you can gracefully and lovingly and compassionately and with empathy step into it. And if I may, I just reiterate those ways. We talk about loving kindness, education, mentorship, civic engagement, voting, activism. And I think there are many ways that we can step into change if we approach it with open hearts and just take one step. And if I think about my parents and I understand I'm white and I'm a woman, but I'm also not of the predominant faith, Adrienne, as you talk about, and people would say the same thing to me. You would be so great if, or you're great, but. And my parents raised me, my father was gender and colorblind. He just said, you can be and do whatever you want if you're willing to work for it. And because I really believe that, what I encountered stepping out into the world was very different. And my empowerment to change, make change, create change came from that belief and where I stand. So my life has been dramatically improved and changed by meeting and working with all of you and approaching with open heart. So what's next for the Beloved Community Project is every time we screen this film and we have conversations, and Marian, please step in with this, we are asked, well, what does this look like to mentor somebody? What is civic engagement? How do you, so we've cooked up a way to address this, and that we are looking to, one, increase the outreach of this film and to reach more people, to have the conversations, the dialogues, because that's, once you increase awareness, that lays the foundation for change. And the second part is that we are in the process of creating, for lack of a better vocabulary, education modules where our film participants and storytellers are able to share stories and address, say the word of mentorship in a way that can be brought to classrooms, to businesses, to communities gathering, to interested individuals. So our aim is to increase awareness, increase the dialogue, potentially lay the groundwork for change by meeting the needs that are addressed with us for continued dialogue and discussion about how do I, and maybe that's a way to further stepping into positive nonviolent social change. Marian, what do you think? What else?
You're so sweet. Amy's sweet.
I think all of that, but I have to go back to my personal experience with unrest in Boston in 73, 74. The riots were horrific. And the faith-based community found a way to come together. And that's what we need to see across the country. We need to see faith-based communities. Here in Utah, it is the Mormon Church. Other places in the country, it might be the Catholic Church, or it might be Baptist. But we all need to come together and figure out what we agree on and work to that. And that's about, change happens when people figure out how they can work together, how they can support one another, not focus on the difference. Let's focus on what we agree on. And so that's what I'm hoping this film will encourage. One of the recurring memories, Martin Luther King worked on his PhD in Boston at Boston University, and his soon-to-be wife, Coretta Scott King, was at the conservatory, and they met in Boston, and MLK was minister to youth at the church I grew up in, 12th Baptist. And so some 10 years later, when they needed to raise money to bail all those folks out who were arrested at the lunch counters or the marches, Coretta Scott King gave freedom concerts. And she would come to Boston and sing at Jordan Hall for the masses. And before leaving Boston, she often came in the afternoon on Sunday and gave a recital. And I remember being up in the balcony, looking down and hearing this soaring soprano voice. And at the end of her recital, she did a song that had been really popular, play South Pacific. And the song is titled, "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught." And the words are, you've got to be carefully taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. And then she would just stand and you could hear a pin drop in the room. And she would say, if we can teach hate, surely we can teach love. And that is the message of the beloved community, that only love can defeat hate. Okay.
Woohoo. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And we had a final audience question that I think will tie this up the poem was perfect. But an audience question we want to ask, and maybe due to time, you can each pick one, but are there local individuals or organizations, in addition to yourselves, that you suggest connecting with to help move Utah and the US closer to MLK's vision of a beloved community?
Wow.
My organization, Sowing Seeds of Change, Utah Black Roundtable, and the NAACP are great organizations that I would suggest you connect with for social change.
In Salt Lake, the YWCA has a lot of programs that speak to this agenda as well.
And in Ogden, Give Me a Chance, the Catholic organization. That's a wonderful outreach that we can. And Betty Sawyer's, her after-school program, it's not on the tip of my tongue right now.
Project Success.
That's it, Project Success. Betty Sawyer is an excellent source also to go to for public change.
There's also a coalition forming around the Marshall White Center. There's some innovations that are taking place, and that's a great way to get involved in the community.
I would say engaging in a community would be the Heartland Community Center, Mountain View Elementary, to volunteer and participate. I would say 99.9 students live below poverty level, and their parents are working 2 to 3 jobs, and there are needs for people to engage and provide meaningful after school projects and initiatives. It's a great way to get involved. At a higher level, the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs, Nubia Pena is the director, Byron Russell is the co-chair, and they are doing a lot of work in juvenile detentions. They're also working to change policy, and they teach trainings on equality and equity for corporations and schools that are really, really powerful. And two other places, because my art orientation is Art Access, that works with people of all abilities and pairs students with mentors. I can't remember what my, and I just recently got introduced to the Black Artist Exchange.
Fantastic. And I would suggest the Black African and African American Health Task Force. You can connect with them on Facebook. And right now the focus is on mental health and women's health. So really excited to see the initiatives around there. So
there's Reverend Barber's Poor People's Campaign that people can go online to Google and figure out how to get involved that way.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you all. Thank you, panelists, and thank everyone for their time and questions. If you have not had the opportunity to watch the film, the Utah Film Center will be screening it free and on demand on their online platform. Feel free to share it with folks and watch it again if you've already watched it. It's a great film. And also, we invite you to connect with us. Meaning Brolly Arts. We have a webpage. We also are on social media, including Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then, of course, you can connect with us via email. So without further ado, we'd like to close today right at 8:30. And again, feel free to connect with us after.
Thank you all so much for a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. You're awesome. Thank you, everyone. Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.